QLAFD, the podcast. I'm your host, Hassan. With me for season 2, we have the beloved author, Keona R. Williams, author of Too Much to Text, But It Had to Be Said. Keona, how are you?
I am well, Hassan, and thank you for having me. I'm great. How are you?
Doing well.
Good
This
job.
is I feel like this is an important interview, mainly because in terms of searching for content, what it is that I try to do on my platform is to try to find something that is not necessarily the norm in terms of trend of what you get with Black podcast media. I think that the book club in itself is kind of a long forgotten social environment. And I read, and poetry isn't something that I've really discussed that much here, although I really like it. I'm a fan of Saul Williams. And initially what I thought, just because we have an association, we are friends of friends of friends. But in that, when I read this, because I wanted to support you, I said, well, this isn't just a book of poetry. This is not necessarily a tell-all, but it is kind of a purge to a degree. And I really appreciated that, because that's brave. I hate using that word, but it is. In terms of you releasing that publicly for the sake of your healing. So I think that this episode would probably touch on self-healing, mental health, understanding the road that one has traveled, which I am not qualified to speak on. Hence the term of the podcast. You are qualified to touch on this.
Oh, brave. You used the term that phrases it, right? That's a big deal for me. It was brave for me to do this, probably because of how I've grown up. So thank you for that.
No worries. We're similar in age. We probably have, just by my reading, I assume nothing ever. But in the reading of this, I said, well, this is something that I'm familiar with by association. And then also there are two maybe, because we're going to cover some excerpts here, but there are two maybe that I think mean something that I may be wrong on. So I wanted you to clarify it for me, just, in respect and appreciation of the book. I don't want to tell or recite too much of your book, because the game is to be sold, not told. Pick up this book, okay? We'll tell you where to find it at the end of the sit-down part. For that, the origin of the book, what's the backstory?
So the backstory of the book: my grandmother passed in 2019, in December of 2019, and it shook me. It shook my entire everything. She was the foundation of my faith. She was the foundation of my upbringing. She was my rock, right? You hear people say that and you really don't understand. But what I learned in her passing was that she was very multidimensional. And she was my grandmother, and I had no idea, right? And that pushed me reading her obituary. Even as I wrote it, right? I wrote her obituary, but even reading her obituary, I learned so much. And I'm like, wow, I don't want my children to get to my death and learn that their mother did X, Y, Z. I don't want that for my children. And so my grandmother was a big push for me to write, right? She's a big push for Jeremiah 30:20, which says, write the words down in the book that I've given to you. And so that's what I did. I took a cue from her passing, and I said it was time. Her leaving Earth was time for me to evolve from comfort.
That's powerful. Very similar as well. My father passed in 2019, and I wrote his obituary. And while I had a lot of conversations with him, the things that I had to do in terms of research, just to make sure it's accurate, you know what I mean? The things that I learned in research was even more, amazing to me when I'm learning them. It's like, wow, he did that, good, bad, or indifferent. It's still like, wow, he did that. Oh, he did that too. I completely understand it. And what a responsibility it is to actually cull through the memories and items of a loved one in order for you to tell that to everybody else as to who they really were, in your own words. And I think you did very well. I don't think that my credit is necessarily important here, but in reading it, I believe you did very well in terms of the forward and the preface of your book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Most people don't read the forward nor the preface. So, but
You
it
got
was
to
a
front
lot
to
of
back books.
emotion. It was a lot of emotion.
Sure.
It was very fearful for me to even say publish. That was
Mm,
fearful. It was a space of anxiety for me. So I'm glad that you
sure.
read it and felt the emotion because it was very emotional.
Related, because it is related to your book, but in this, I always feel that from a social element, what's something that's lacking, at least in our community, is that why we relate to each other isn't usually discussed. We'll find it, like we will say it unspoken, like it'll just be the vibe you get from each other.
Mhm.
But if someone's hurting, I've learned, because we're older now, if someone's hurting, it's important to acknowledge it.
Mhm.
Relatability is good. Trauma bonding, it really is probably the healthiest, but a relatability about the experience is good as long as it is comparable. Because sometimes people say it just so you don't feel as bad. No, 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 no. Feel bad, hurt, but heal. But just know that you're not alone. Just know that you're not alone. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Um, I read it twice just to make sure that this is what I needed to get from it. The start of this, though, so you wrote. So are you saying that your grandmother was the inspiration for your writing, or were you writing before this?
Well, I've been writing since second grade, right? That's been my thing. I keep my journal and I brought it as a prop, right? I keep my journal and it's full of pages. You'll see back from 2011, 2002. I've been writing for a long time. It was and so a lot of the pieces that I've written, these are the recent pieces, the current stories, the current pieces of literature uh, after her passing, because as I said, it shook me in a way that it was almost as if something opened in me and unlocked, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to capture this and pull it all together. And blogging was journaling to me, but I needed to do this so that I feel like I'm coming from a place that isn't discussed, right? We don't talk about trauma. We don't talk about, the healing process. And I think that that's what's missing. And I think that in writing, that's what I was trying to expose. It's for some, it's all over the place. You're talking about love. You're talking about hurt. You're talking about grief. You're talking about the plight of a Black woman. I needed all of that to see that I wasn't just one dimensional, that I wasn't one dimensional. So this was really, my grandmother was my inspiration, but this was for me. This was definitely a release for me.
So in that thought process of it being released for you, um, just curious, when she passed, afterwards, did you feel the need to seek professional counsel, or did you just take this upon yourself to make the writing be the therapy, so to speak?
So I've been in therapy since I've been in therapy since 96.
Okay.
Um, and partly because of how I grew up. I grew up in the city of Detroit. I was a teenage runaway. And I've seen things that most people haven't seen so up close and personal.
Sure.
And so I've been in counseling since that time. And obviously the methods that they tell you to heal is put it in black and white. When you need validation, put something in writing because that makes it real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a different kind of release. I've been writing for years. I've been talking to my therapist for years, literally. And I'm in a healthy space, but I still get triggered. I still have moments where I want to sit in my prayer closet and don't talk to anybody, right? I just want to have me and my pen and my paper, or me and my phone, or wherever I am. I use that opportunity to write, which is a part of my healing process, but it is not the defining part. Right? The
Sure.
experiences are the defining part. The writing is the result of the experience. And so,
Sure.
No, grandmother she wasn't the reason that I wrote it. uh, the literal reason that I wrote it, but definitely figuratively, I felt her spirit pushing me. This was something that I needed to do for me.
I understand. Therapy, again, very underutilized in our society. However, I found uses in it as well. Talked to therapists in two separate occasions for long term. But for that, grief counseling is one thing. Getting your feelings out. I don't necessarily want to call that anger management. It's not like it was court ordered, but you know what I mean. Like, it was one of those things where what I really wanted to have personally was a unbiased opinion, because I would be able to speak with someone who knew me, and they would of course be team me, or you speak with someone else and they don't know you, and I felt like that would be healthier in terms of the conversation, because you can have a friend and they can let you know that you're bugging out, or hey, you're looking at this the wrong way, but most friends don't, because when you initially talk about this, it's because you're coming from a place of hurt, and your friends are automatically defensive of that. So they're like, oh wow, well, who did this to you, or what happened? Tell me all about it, girl. It already starts off team you. So this person particularly that I would speak with, the doctor, would not know anything about me. So she's looking at this very objectively, and I can appreciate that, because when she tells me that my thought process may be misdirected, number one, that's what I paid you for, but that's what I came here for. So I need to know that. To say it out loud though is still something like, wow, we really are talking about therapy for Black people. You know what I mean?
Right. It's even, I haven't even shared that with my mother, right? I haven't shared that I've been in therapy since 1996.
Wow.
But I could not function without it. I would be an emotional mess, right? Yeah. I grew up very, very engaged in the church, engaged in the church. And so we grew up hearing, oh, just pray about it and that'll fix it. Jesus will fix everything.
Yeah.
But internally, I felt like, well, why isn't he fixing me? And so at first I had to identify what was wrong, and I couldn't do that by myself. And, that pushed me into, seeing somebody, right? And it started off as group therapy for me as a high school child. A very, very troubled teenage years. But I didn't even realize that that's what the school put me in. They put me in this therapy for troubled kids. And I'm like, oh, is that me? Is that how we're identifying me? And I didn't call it therapy for years. I'm like, oh, we're just going to group session. Right. But to say out loud, I am a proponent of and a result of somebody counseling me and telling me how to channel the feelings to that it was okay not to be okay. That's important. That's what we need to hear. And so, yes, it's a moment of transparency. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you for saying it. No, I appreciate that. It's a reason. I mean, I believe in it. I'm a proponent of it. I did youth counseling as well, mentor. I think that's, at least at that level of philanthropy, that's how I'm giving back. But I think it's healthy because you don't always have it. It's good to have a writer, but it's also good to have a person who has your best interest in mind, even though you may be going down the wrong road. So not to stay too much on that. My question though, in terms of the writing then, do you feel as though this was also therapeutic?
Absolutely. But in a different way. And what I mean by that is therapy is very, it's that 1 hour session, right? This book is the evidence of the work that I've done to heal myself.
Sure.
It's the evidence. It's actually, I wrote that, and it's interesting because most times when I write something, I won't go back and read it. I found myself proud that, man, I overcame that, right? And that was, we unpacked that in session, but I was also able to journal it and explore it with my words, tell people this is what I was feeling at this moment. It's going to be raw, sure. It's not going to be, that pristine, preserved young lady that you find in the church. It's not going to be Minister Keona Williams. It's going to be Keona. You might get Key today.
There you go. And we should have duality. We should have, I feel like we can be both. I just explained this to somebody recently. We were just, in a training session, and they said, are you always like this? I said, no, somewhere around 5 o'clock, I'm not the same. But, after this, we might get a little bit more intense because, I have to purge, I have to release, I have my outlets, but, I'm just not going to have them here. You'll get twinges of it. The eyes change, I get glazed over, get shark eyes every once in a while when I talk about stuff, but I have to pull myself back,
Yeah.
And so in formatting this book, it is a poetry book. It's a book of poetry. Is this the right way to categorize it? How do you define your work?
So to me, right, I haven't acquired poet status. To me, my favorite poet, Langston Hughes, I've been a fan since I was 4. Okay. He is the GOAT, right, okay, in my heart. And so I haven't reached that level of artistic ability, in my opinion. And so I call it a book of creative writings, right? Okay. Because poetry has evolved to these long 3-4 hour videos. I see people spitting 3 or 4 hours of art, and I'm like in awe of that. That's not what I did. What I did, I just put words on paper. Okay. And I call it creative writing, okay, just because I created it. It's mine, and it doesn't compare. And I'm not in competition, but it doesn't compare to the artists that I look up to.
I respect that. I'm going to challenge it though, because it's creative writing. It is in rhythmic format, but it does translate more to spoken word, which, we'll call that newer. I mean, Gil Scott Heron may be one of the pioneers of it, so to speak, like Dead Poets Society, things like that, be set to music. But nonetheless, Langston Hughes, that's the same as you saying, or me saying that I aspire to be Muhammad Ali. It ain't gonna be that, but it is going to be the fact that we are in the same categorical arena, right? It's not just creative writing, it is poetry, and it was profound. Like what I'm reading was poignant. And I could also, because I'm imaginary, photography background, I can always imagine you would be on stage with this book, as I've seen before in the deaf poetry jams or slam competitions and things like that. This is there. It's absolutely, but you have a published work. So for this conversation, at least I just want to focus on this being a self-published exploit. So you did this through Blurb, which is essentially on-demand publishing. Why Blurb as opposed to, number one, any other outlet that would do that? So I guess that would be Blurb, there's probably Pelican, there's Amazon, or you could just make a lot of books and sell them yourself. Why choose Blurb?
So my grandmother's birthday was March 28th, and that was my release date. And I wanted 100% complete control over the release. So the first edition released on her birthday. That it just happened. It just had to happen for me. But Blurb was the outlet that allowed me to get it done in a time frame that I needed. I didn't have to do all of the hiccups. I was responsible for most of, if not all of, editing and design. It was kind of scary. So it was my try it and see. Right? Let me see how this feels, what it looks like. Is this something I can stand behind? Because I'm that chick who, if a hair is out of place, I'm having a panic attack, right? I'm that chick. If I don't go back and read my words because of editing, I would edit and re-edit and re-edit and re-edit. Sure. This challenged me to, one, sit still. Right? Blurb allowed me that outlet to sit still, do what you needed to do, get it done. And I didn't have a bunch of noise. And what I mean by noise is, editors, publishers they want to curb it, change it. I didn't want any of that. I wanted you all to have raw, authentic Keona. There is no secondary eyes that touch this. There aren't any additional comments from people that persuaded me to do it a particular way. Blurb allowed 100% of my artistic ability. And that was the primary reason I chose Blurb. Now going forward, I don't know if it'll be the platform that I use to publish the next book.
Sure.
However, if I find that they are infringing, they being the corporate entities of publishing agencies or marketing aid firms or what have you, if I find that they're overly aggressive in my art, then of course I'll utilize the platform that is going to allow me the most liberty.
Sure. I mean, self-publishing is, in terms of music now, as well as, literary work, tends to be the way to go. I mean, even with YouTube, it's now a conduit for anyone to have a platform. And it's really just survival games at this point. If you are big enough or if you have a big enough voice or able to reach a good amount of people with content, they will come to you, which is the same thing in any other game of publishing. So with that being said, though, you have other publishing options, though. Yeah, and so have you spoken with publishers since you made this book?
I have spoken with the publisher. I'm only one.
Okay.
And what I told her was, at this time, I'm not considering going to any agency to do my work. Right. I never started writing to be rich or to be, it wasn't about the notoriety for me. It was about what legacy I would leave behind, and some of the things that I was feeling. I wanted to capture that without anyone else's opinion or involvement or engagement.
Sure. I 100% feel you on this, because this is such a personal book, right? That it would be almost disrespectful for you to listen to some other outside entity or person telling you how to express yourself based on this. I'm imagining that if you took 40 pages out of your journal and said, this is what I would commit to a published work, you would not want that filtered or edited by anyone else, because they don't know how you felt. And even if they did know how you felt, they're not you. So it's this one's different. Now you end up writing something more outside of the scope of your own personal experience. Sure, why not? Let's talk. I understand that. This one, for sure, this is your baby, so it's rightful for you to be defensive about it and protective. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, can we talk about the book in terms of its content?
Absolutely, let's do it.
So I read it, of course, and I bookmarked a few of them. But what I was looking at was on page 10, submit to compromise. The nature of it, though, I'll just read some of it. So, okay. We were warned that we'd repeat it because our pride is so deep-seated. Period. This, though, I'm not trying to give too much of it, right? But at the same time, that one statement, I highlighted. I literally wrote it with a highlighter. This is like a notebook for me. I like that in itself because it's powerful and true. But in the conversation that you're having, this is a reflection. I'm imagining that this is a reflection. I'm going to do a whole paragraph and you just tell me if I'm on the right page, okay? We look back for our correction instead of ahead for faith's affection. We look back with hopes to gain that thing we left that we should have remained. Oh, the things we do surely dread when we look back instead of ahead.
So this particular piece, I wrote it for my sister, who was getting married, right? And I'm, just a little bit about me in this piece. I've been married for now 22 years, and my husband and I, thank you, my husband and I will celebrate 27 years together as of August 28th, right? Awesome. And so when I wrote this piece, I thought about the journey of all of the regret behind me, all of the things I didn't do in my marriage. And I wanted to pour into her new marriage what I wished someone would have said to me. Don't look back. You won't find anything there. You can't trip if you don't look back, right? But instead of instead of saying those words to her, because she's my older sister, I had to do it in a way that she could accept it. So I had to make it about we, us, a collective, because as Black people, our experience is a little different, but it is so laced with pride. And sometimes that pride is our demise. And it's unfortunate to say, but sometimes pride will get you in some situations that you shouldn't really be in. And that's basically what I wanted to tell her going into life. Don't allow your pride, don't allow the past of your pride to even influence your way forward. You've moved on from that. You've grown from that. Let's learn from that and take it from there.
Again, I relate. No, I understand that. Again, the words are powerful. The words are powerful. And in this in itself being a unsolicited advice for your sister, that would be, fantastic, but it is strong in wording. And again, I'm a male binary, listening or reading into this and looking in it as let me dig deeper into what it is that I've gone through to see if I can relate to this, because this is a very strong, just to be very frank, this is a very strong and very woman-centric empowerment style of writing. All of them, all 40 pages is that. And that is incredibly good. It's just that I need to make sure that I'm taking myself out of my own comfort zone when I'm reading it, because I want some relatability, right?
Art is subjective. Art is definitely subjective. So it means to you what it means, right? It means to you what it means. To my sister, it meant something. To my brother-in-law, it meant something, right? Because I'm very much that sister who's going to check you if my sister comes to me and say, hey, we not doing, I'm gonna call my brother-in-law. We have that relationship where I could. But I was talking to the both of them. Like, both of them had passed, right? My sister was a divorcee. And sometimes in marriage, we tend to compare, right? And that's when we start doing, that's where we're off the road. Where you can't start a new road with the old guy. You can't start this new journey with the old guy. So, and neither could he. And so the compromise is the listening, right? Hear and listen to what is being said. And sometimes it doesn't have to come from your significant other. It can come from the pastor, the therapist, your homegirl, your homeboy. Stop listening to the voices in your head that's telling you the past was the right way, because if the past was the right way, it would have propelled your future in a different path. So it was definitely for both of them.
Awesome. If you were right in doing what you did, you would not be where you are now. Page 10, from too much to text, but it had to be said. I then jumped to page 15. The first 6 lines to me were what caught me. However, Love Theory, A Beautiful Mess by Paul wrote that love is patient, it is kind, it is not prideful, envious, or vain. Yet the theory of love becomes obscure with each memory we gain. Wrapped in rotten, spoiled to shame, overwhelming emotion, love is to blame. Kanye West, Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Blame Game. Probably top 5 favorite song of mine all time. And for that, when I listen to this, every time I hear love and blame at the same time, I just automatically associate it that way. But nonetheless, this is something that's very unilateral. So it's not just, if we're just going to look at it in terms of the woman's experience with this, if you were actually looking through your past experiences, male or female, in whatever relationship that may be, this does make you start to reflect. It did to me, because again, I think that at a certain age you probably have gone through 1 to 3 different relationships, so you at least know why they ended, or at least you have your own idea of why they ended. And for that, if you really become introspective, maybe you can share some of the responsibility. And this is the start. A Beautiful Mess. I think that is, title wise, very valuable, because yes, it's imperfect, but it is still pure.
This too, I actually spoke this one. This was I spoke this one and wrote this one for my baby sister who
Okay.
was to getting married, and I don't want. I wanted them not to make the mistakes in their marriage that I've made in my marriage. And you hit on it. Introspective. I would have said, "Oh, I've been perfect, right? I work, I take care of my kids, all
Mhm.
of the boxes I check, right?"
Right.
However, I still found myself arguing and debating, and I'm just like, why are we doing this? Like,
Mhm.
I, I'm perfect, aren't you? Don't you understand that I'm
Don't you see?
perfect? Right. And so it challenged me to go to the Bible, right? This love is patient, love is kind comes from First Corinthians chapter 13, the
Mhm.
ultimate guide for love. And it's from the perspective of Paul, the author. And I
Mhm.
wanted to say a man would take this from a man, right?
Yeah.
But to hear you should be kind, it doesn't sound like advice that you should give in a marriage because you assume that you should be kind. But
Sure.
no, you should definitely be kind and you should definitely not be vain. But if in fact you are, let's look at how rotten that is and what it does to love,
Right.
right? Let's look at that and say, oh, I I hold some accountability in this. I'm the reason because of course I allowed my husband to spoil me rotten. And
Mhm.
then I thought absolutely nothing of it. I thought, oh, this is the person you wanted, but it wasn't, right?
Mhm.
And it's when we create these monsters that we absolutely love, what happens? You
Sure.
know, it's the mess that you have to overcome. What happens to that mess? Somebody has to put it together and organize it in such a way that it's palatable for other
Sure.
people. And that's my perspective of marriage. That's my perspective of my friendships.
Mhm.
This is not just about marriage. This is about every friendship that I've had that's gone south, or every friendship that I've maintained over 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do and how do you manage with your partner when the honeymoon ends? Um,
Oh,
you know. So
oh. It comes back somewhere after year 8, right? I tell people
sure.
all that all of the time. It comes back. Those first 7 years though are rough. And if you get to where we are, right? I celebrate myself and my husband all the time. If you get to where we are, it is so worth the mess. It's so worth the late night tears. It's so worth I just want to scream. It's so worth the labor of arguing, right? The labor of arguing is so worth it, especially when it's from a pure place. It's from a place of love.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
think that we lose that. I think that we forget that with the hype of, oh, I'm married, or my wife, or the titles. My
Yeah.
wife, my husband, provider, I'm a stay at home mom, I'm a professional. You lose all of that with the titles. So let's get back to what's pure. Let's get back to, you know, be kind,
Be
be
kind.
patient.
Be patient. Read your book. Read the book. Also listen to Calvin Richardson. Treat her right. Make her feel special. Just throwing it out there. Uh, for anybody
Write
who
that
likes
down.
Calvin Richardson, the Soul Prince. It's a juke joint song, by the way. Like if you ever go, I don't know how much time you spent on the back ends of town in Houston, but if you go to places that do not have alcohol licenses, but you're still listening to the juke joint music, you're gonna hear the song. You're gonna hear it.
Okay.
I'd play it for you, but we're gonna get pulled down if I did that. So I have two more.
Okay.
Page 18. They, name of the title. For the audience, I'm reading excerpts. These are not the entirety of each work on each page. I do feel that the entirety of the work is much more powerful than what I'm reading. I'm just actually talking about what stood out to me, so that we can get more from it. They, middle paragraph states, they must think we're weak, telling us when and how to speak, until we are back into oppression because lust controls their obsession. They have yet to learn their lesson. So I got two thoughts on this, like just off the paragraph. So one of them, in reading the whole work, I read like 3 times, and in reading the whole work, I thought this may be in terms of what people of power may feel about Black culture, Black people in general. That was one. Then I started to listen to it as I said it out loud, and I said, I think this may be where a masochistic society may view women, and I don't know which one is correct. So can you put me in the right place?
Both are correct.
Okay.
And I say both are correct because they is anybody who is not me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I am I'm a Black woman. I'm a Black corporate professional.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been faced with scenarios in my personal experience as a Black woman, in my professional experience, where, oh no, don't say it that way, or reword it this way, or, to the point where it has, I'm tired. I'm tired, and people need to understand, they need to understand that you don't define me. And in defining me, what I mean is you can't tell me how to look. You can't tell me how to act. You can't tell me how to speak, right? Even our vernacular, even they've labeled Ebonics. Well, that just happens to be how I grew up. And so I had to change that Detroit urbanistic influence to match where I was trying to go, even to be successful in my career. And that makes me feel some kind of way, because now we call that code switching. And for me, code switching is culture washing, right? I grew up with that day, I grew up with those things. And so now to take them away from me, you're taking a part of me away. And I resent that. And I needed to voice that. They are anybody else who intends to define how you look, how you act, or what's appropriate, societal standard. All of those are they. And, it's they in a misogynistic environment. It's they in a political environment. It's they in a Christian environment. They're all over. It's not just a black and white they. A lot of people who read this piece thought that I was talking about they. No, it has absolutely nothing to do with your race. It has everything to do with your being. And you are allowed to be. And let me be. And that's all that's all anyone could ask. Let us be, without any opposition or pushback from them.
I was even polarized that you made mention of it. I was polarized by when California educational system decided to put together a curriculum to teach Ebonics in school. And I said, why would you need to do that? Because where I come from, if you're trying to understand how a micro society or a small community communicates with each other, you're trying to infiltrate. That's the way I think. And I don't think that's necessary, because I think that every society, every culture, subculture within society has their own Ebonics, for lack of a better word. You're going to go somewhere in Mississippi where it's not Black, and they're going to speak in ways that you don't know. You're going to say, what does that mean? Everyone's going to say that. But it's not like they had to teach a class in Alabama on how they talk in the hills. They just let it be. So I've never really formed an opinion about it, good, bad, or indifferent. I just thought it was unnecessary. But it was also something that made me think more now that I'm older about code switching and about our society and why we shouldn't lose it, but when and where to use it. Like it's,
for me, you've got to know that when I'm with my sorors, or when I'm with my group, my core group, my group of friends, the dialogue is different. Professional Keona is a lot different from Key, right? We talked about duality. When I'm walking up the street in Detroit, Michigan, I can't be professional Key. I need to be someone else, right? And I understand that I need to be somebody else. And to me, because I can't be my authentic self in the office, one, because of the environment in which I work, it wouldn't be appropriate. But two, I'm not comfortable there. So, I do have to, there are some things that I have to change. Now, there's some things that I'm just not going to conform to and conform with. But now I can communicate in a way where it's effective and it's palatable, right? It can be consumed by a broader audience. That's not who I am at home. When I'm talking to my children, that's not who I am. When I'm talking to my husband, that's not who I am. When I'm in the pulpit, at church, speaking to the congregants for whatever reason, that's not who I am. I think that code switching is adjusting to your environment in a way that is uncomfortable for you. Not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely something that's going to make you grow. But it should be mentioned that that's not who I am. I'm giving you my representative today, and you would be grateful to receive my representative, because if you receive me and my full self, you might pause.
So we are acting as an agent on our own behalf in environments where we don't necessarily feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
Dialogue is the last one. I can hear this in my own experiences. Like, I related to this one completely. In this though, I'm going to go with the middle first page. This is page 25, middle first page. So we were deeply absorbed by recent political views, by the outcome of change, by the shifting of a narrative we assumed from the day prior. It was deep. Dialogue. We journeyed this road, shifting lanes from hood to suburban life. Lord knows I relate. From Tupac to Biggie, from his perspective to mine, we will equal in this dialogue. I'm going to leave it at that, because this does take a turn, okay? But then also, though, this one isn't typical poetry. This is a reflection. And the reason why I wanted to use this one, number one, 100% relate, but the reason why I wanted to use this one as the final example is because it's not rhythmic, but it is as impactful. I'll paraphrase if you let me. The rest of it does go into where the conversation took a wrong turn, right? And where it is that I felt so good. So that's page 25, page 26 for those who will hopefully buy this book so that you can experience what it is that I experienced in reading it. Page 25, 26 describes in total a conversation that starts off really well in a relationship between two adults discussing their children, and then takes a wrong turn in terms of how the communication somehow or another gets not necessarily intentionally, but misinterpreted. And so then you make mention of, I go back to the map to try to figure out where we got lost. Powerful. I could not have described a conversation that I wish had gone well in terms of how often you speak with each other on a regular routine basis, and it just keeps going sideways. We'll just consider that within the first 8 years, like you said. So it just keeps going sideways no matter how hard you try. What's your take on passion with your partner in terms of how you communicate? Should you be 100% passionate, or should you also try to be an agent of yourself while speaking with them?
So that was an actual depiction of my husband and I, right? Just because people see us on Facebook and they'll assume, oh, you guys are perfect and you got it figured out. No, not at all. Children threw some mixes in there. And so
for sure.
I'll be very honest, for myself, I was a very traditional wife. I was the Proverbs 31 wife for a long time. Right. I married at 21. I met him at 17. Granny said, get married. And so I felt and was raised to believe that my voice should be quieted for a period when I'm speaking with my husband. Hassan, at 40, I found my voice, and I found the passion in the dialogue that I talk, that I speak with my husband. I found that I could be comfortable and yell and speak it loudly and be my authentic, emotional, angry, all of the other adjectives. I could be who I was.
Right.
And that felt great, but it did not come without consequence, right?
Sure.
Because, when I was younger, I used to tell people, don't turn your back on fire. You don't know how big it'll get, right? As it pertains
Right.
to a heated discussion with your significant other.
I
So
respect this. Okay.
I was always the let him speak, and I'll sit and listen and I'll take notes, and then I'll go to my journal and I would have a field day. And this particular discussion, this dialogue, it was almost like I had stepped out of myself to have this discussion. And some of the expletives that I used, I was surprised, but it felt great because I had never done it. and so and so and it was an awakening. It was an awakening to be able to have this dialogue with my husband for the first time after several years of being married to the same person. It even took him aback. He was like, oh, wow, I like that, because from before we were just who we were. So this was definitely a dialogue. I believe that passion is important. I believe that you should be able to give your significant other who you are, your authentic self. And that changes, who you are changes as you get older. And so this was the manifestation of that.
Admittedly, finding your voice at 40, right? Whereas I think is, the healthier thing to do. You're right. It does come at consequence. I was married before. And what I realized in reflection of it is that you really don't know who you're with because that's an evolution. I'm not saying that you marry a stranger. I'm just saying that you have no idea of what's going to happen 10 years down the line because you don't know what life is going to throw at you. And you don't know how that person in their own personal journey of growth is going to experience that. However, the passion that exchanged towards, let's say, mid-range all the way towards the end, the passion that was exchanged there was where I'm like, that's not the same person. I think there's going to be a natural progression from, okay, this is the role, but this isn't the 50s anymore. This is what I feel, and I understand that we both obeyed by these guidelines, but this isn't the 20s anymore. So, you're going to have to acquiesce to a new person over time. I can imagine how the conversation went because I've had those conversations too, where I have to look back and say, oh, okay. So we're talking. Okay, this is the way we're talking now. Gotcha. But my question is passion based on what I read. I can understand how you can go from music to what's happening to, what you expect out of your children. And now it becomes polarized. Now it becomes, I get it. I totally get it.
A moment of a heated disagreement is just that. It's a moment. It's a moment in time. And my husband has been very supportive, and he's always been who he is. Like, I have not watched how he dialogues evolve. But for me to find myself in a discussion with him and feel at liberty to speak how I felt, that was therapy. It was therapy, but it was also, wait, did I overstep? Is there such thing as overstepping with this person that loves me and that I love?
Fair.
And it just depends on what your rules are, right? What your boundaries are. Yeah. And for us, we've committed to each other, right? And we are evident of that. Hence the 27 years together. Yeah. But we committed in accepting the unknown, right? Whatever it is, accepting that unknown. And he says all the time, he's 7 years older. He says all the time, oh, you're going to get somebody younger and blah, blah, blah. Y'all gonna, we're not, no, you going to deal with this mouth. and that's what it is, right? Because a lot of people, as a Black woman, you get that stigma of oh, you're angry. No, I'm assertive and I'm vocal. And and I know how to use words and put
Mhm.
them in a way and yell them in a way that you're going to understand, right?
Sure.
You're gonna learn today that, oh, if we need to take a left turn and park and get out so that we can have this discussion, that's what we're gonna do.
That's the
But
pullover.
yeah, if that's what we need to do, then that's what needs to happen. But and even in that, there are boundaries, right? There shouldn't be a personal attack. I'm
Sure.
not yelling and screaming and calling you names. I'm delivering my message with all of the passion that I feel. And if you know me, then you know that.
That's exactly it.
Mhm.
That's exactly it. In terms of highlighting, if I could highlight four, that's what I asked myself. If I could highlight four of these, what would they be? That would have been the last one. I thought it was fantastic. Um, and in respect of your time, because I really appreciate it, I didn't want to jump on too many of them. But A, is there anything that you want to ask of me? But also, is there anything else that you wanted to cover in terms of your excerpts?
First, let me just say thank you overwhelmingly.
No,
This has been a great experience, and I appreciate the platform. Right, we don't have men and women don't have more dialogues like this where we can actually sit down and have a discussion, a multifaceted discussion. We talked about therapy, we talked about love, we've talked about relationships, we've talked about growth. And
yeah.
so for that, I appreciate this platform. So thank you.
Mhm.
Um, I don't necessarily have any questions. I just wanted to offer that, and I wanted to, if I would just give you my absolute favorite from the book,
Sure.
um, and that would be the piece that I wrote for my granny. Right,
Okay.
it's on page 22, and it's Hello Heaven. And this piece, I'm not going to read it, obviously, because I don't want to get emotional here. But Hello Heaven to me was me giving my granny back to God.
Sure.
Me returning her, right? This source, this woman that she was, this 4'8" stature, sixth grade education having woman who had it all, right? She
Mhm.
had faith, she raised her children, and when I say faith, I thought it was a mustard seed of faith, but my granny, coming from where we originated in Mississippi,
Mhm.
and she came during, a time of Jim Crow South and civil rights stuff, and
Segregation, all that. Yeah.
so all of that, migrating to Michigan was a big deal. And
Mhm.
so for her final transition, it was almost like I know she had to be there. And my granny was very authentic in that she would curse you out, and then she would pray for you and feed you and tell you what you better not do to your husband. And
Mhm.
she was that woman for me. And that piece, it is my absolute favorite. I wrote the book to publish that piece alone. Um, and just to honor her with my words, because that's how she wanted to be honored, right? She would
Sure.
always, okay, read me something, right? Granny had a
Mhm.
sixth grade education, read me something. So I'm like, okay, I'd be stuck reading the Bible or reading, something that had absolutely nothing to do with what we were talking about. Grandma, I didn't come over here to read no book, but that was that was my piece to her, and I wanted to highlight that piece.
Clearly, I read it. I understand that. I speak about that amongst family and friends and said I'm only 1 year removed from being able to talk about my father very steady without, cracking. You know what I mean? I don't know what time it's going to take before this not become a non-emotional, very steady pace. And I don't really care how long it takes because I understand passionately how that what impact they had on me, and
Mhm.
that I respect. I get it. Very powerful, by the way. I asked myself some of these same questions that I read when you were writing this. Let me just say this again: knowing how personal this was, I feel like journaling, writing is probably one of the more underutilized therapeutic items that we could do for self-reflection, for acknowledgement of issue, for acknowledgement of ambition. I 100% agree that it's a useful medium. The fact that you took all of your own personal experiences and put them into art form, because the majority of it is poetry in the standard format poetry. The majority of it is there. And whereas you do not compare yourself to, an all-time great of literary poetry, it is fantastic to read this. It's refreshing. It's eye-opening, by the way. There are probably many authors who have done this. I don't know if I would have read them the same, right? But this is powerful, and I think it's important, which is the reason why I wanted to talk to you about it. So I thank you for being able to even create it. Let's save this for a later discussion. Clearly, we have more to talk about because we have some corporate things to discuss, and there's a future in terms of where this goes on the platform. So again, can you please tell people where to find you?
I am on the more mature platforms. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and now newly TikTok. I'm learning TikTok, and you can find me at Sweeter Than You. That's SWEETRTHANU for more personal engagement, or GYSP.2020 for the Get You Some Peace platform, my blog platform. My website is www.getyousomepeace.com. That's my blog where I talk about my journey to peace, finding peace for me. So it's very healing, therapeutic for me. And I just thought this would be great to share. So you can find more information there.
Too Much to Text, But It Had to Be Said by Keona R. Williams. Fantastic book of poetry. It's a quick read, but a powerful one at that. You can find that on Blurb. Direct link will be put into the comment section on YouTube as well as the social media platforms. My name is Hassan. This is Qualified the Podcast. You can find me on all digital streaming platforms as well as YouTube. Google QLAFD. You may find this episode and more. Season 1 on all platforms as well as Facebook. Season 2 going to be doing the same. Thanks a lot, Keona.
Thank you.